Hey everyone, welcome back to another late-night dive into Reddit's creepiest corners. It's eerie, disturbing, and absolutely worth staying up for. Make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. So turn off the lights, and let's begin. Never go hiking alone. I've always been an avid outdoorsman. Hiking, trail running, mountain biking, I love it all. There is just something so soothing about being out in nature that makes the stresses of life drift away. I could spend my life out in the wilderness and never get tired of it. That is, until I hiked Sweet Connie Trail. The terrain on this hike was pretty difficult, a near constant incline up the face of a rocky mountain slope. It would take about 8 hours to complete the hike in each direction. With a hike so hard, it is reasonable not to see many people undertaking this daunting task, and frankly, I like it that way. The more secluded, the better. On my way up the mountain, I only ran into a few other hikers, but there was something strange in their demeanors. I would give each of them a cordial, "Hello, hi, how's it going?" But none of them returned the sentiment. Instead, they just looked at me in shock. I gave each of them a polite smile and continued my way up the trail. Soon, all other hikers disappeared, and I was the only person on the trail. As I rounded a sharp corner, I heard the rustling of leaves coming from the underbrush off to the side of the path. I didn't think anything of it. It isn't uncommon to hear sounds off in the brush while you're out alone. Most of the time it's just the wind. But as I came closer, the brush thrashed around rather violently. Like any other logical person, I ran through the list of possible culprits. A squirrel? No, it was too large to be a squirrel. Rabbit? A rabbit would have already darted away in search of cover. Suddenly, a laugh drifted out from the foliage. The laugh was innocent, high-pitched, young. A little girl stepped out into the middle of the trail, her back toward me. She was wearing a pink dress, dirty and torn. Her feet were bare, her back tense. I stood there for a second or two, trying to wrap my mind around what I was seeing. She looked hypothermic, her skin icy and pale. She caressed her own arms as if trying to get warm. The little girl's head was slumped down, looking at the path beneath her exposed feet. When the sight before me finally registered, I stepped forward. "Are you okay?" I asked, in my best, non-threatening voice. There was no response, but the little girl did acknowledge my question. She lifted her head, looking at the long trail ahead of us. "What's your name?" Taking another step. The girl's chest began hiccuping, and she huffed in spurts as she started to sob. Hey, don't cry. I'm going to help you," I said, while taking off my jacket, readying myself to drape it against her back. But as I placed the jacket against her exposed skin, she didn't reach for it. It now lay haphazardly across her shoulders, ready to fall to the ground with the slightest movement. "What are you doing out here alone?" I asked, concern filling my voice. Suddenly, the little girl's sobbing stopped, and an uncanny silence fell around us. Nothing made a noise. Not the wind, the birds, the trees. It was as if time had stopped. The silence was broken when the little girl began giggling once again. It started slowly, as if she was trying to hold it in, but giddiness engulfed her, and she started giving a cheery laugh. The little girl lifted a hand to her hair. Her little fingers grasped a handful of her messy black locks, twirling the strands around her grip and slowly pulling away from her head. Her scalp stretched as her hand pulled harder. I took a step back in horror when a few hairs unrooted from her head, my jaw dropping when the handful was yanked free. Her other hand lifted to her head. This time she wasted no time in ripping the hairs from her scalp, my jacket falling to the floor as she did. The hairs hadn't touched the ground when her hand returned to her head. She now frantically ripped her hair free, her giggle morphing into a maniacal cackle. It hadn't been more than a few handfuls, and her head was looking more like a Sarna-riddled dog's. "Hey, stop that!" I said as my stiff limbs finally moved. I gripped the little girl's wrist, stopping her from tearing out another clump of hair. When I did, her laughter instantly stopped the fingers on her hand, bawling in apparent anger. I felt her muscles tense before she thrust her hand out of my grasp. Her hand returned to her head. "Stop," I said with more conviction, stopping her from yanking more hair out. The little girl didn't take kindly to it this time, and she swung her arm back in a sudden burst of supernatural strength. I was shoved back, my backside meeting the exposed earth. I returned to the path ahead, but the little girl was gone. I looked around, expecting to see the girl running through the trees, but my gaze was only met with the dimly lit pine forest. The hairs on the back of my head stood as a familiar laugh drifted through the woods. It sounded distant and muffled, but as I frantically searched for the little girl, she was nowhere to be found, her giggle mocking me from the darkness. Looking at the path ahead, I saw a figure standing in the distance. She wasn't there before, yet there she stood, the little girl yanking her hair in handfuls. When there was no more hair left to pull, she started sobbing again. Freaked out by the situation, I motioned to stand, trying to avoid garnering the attention of the bald figure off in the distance, but as I took to my feet, a few rocks crunched under my weight. The little girl instantly stopped crying as the sound met her ear. Her hands, which once plucked at her head, now fell to her side. My heart thudded in my chest as the silence lingered for a beat or two. She craned her head back, catching a glimpse of me from the side of her gaze, and for the first time, I looked into her eyes. Fluid streaming from her ducts, only it wasn't tears, it was the distinct deep red of blood. She pivoted on her feet and faced me, my senses screaming run as her face came into view. Her skull was partially sunken in, like someone had taken a rock and bashed it against her cranium. She studied me, looking me up and down, unimpressed. I wanted to say something, anything, but I was in shock. The little girl noticed, and a creepy smile slid across her lips, her mouth parting, producing that sweet, innocent laugh. But this time, her laugh got deeper with each inhale. Horror drifted into my body as her eyebrows furled, looking at me like prey. I found my courage and I started to slowly back away, but with each step the little girl mirrored my pace. "What do you want?" I asked quaveringly. The girl didn't answer and continued chuckling manically. "Please don't hurt me," I pleaded, desperation evident in my tone. The little girl picked up the pace. I found myself stumbling on my heels, but as I turned around, facing the path that led back to the trailhead, the little girl stood in front of me in the distance, the red fluid still oozing from her eyes. My feet slid across the trail as I came to a screeching halt. I eyed the little girl up and down, stopping when I got to her feet that no longer touched the ground. They now hovered ominously a few inches above the trail, the blood draining from my face. Words festered on my tongue but caught in my throat, spilling out as a frantic mumble. "What the hell are you?" The little girl stopped her deep demonic chuckle and looked at me, mildly offended. Her mouth started to gape open, revealing a larger than normal void in her face. With one long inhale, her chest expanded and she let out an ear-piercing roar. "Leave!" she screamed, my ears yawning at the bass in her voice. She lifted a gnarled finger and pointed behind her, instructing me to run back down the mountain. Without a second thought, I shot to my feet and scurried around her. The little girl's witchy cackle followed me back down the trail, but when I looked over my shoulder, no one was giving chase. Eventually, the laugh stopped, and the only noises I was hearing were the normal, rhythmic chatter of nature and my anguished breathing. But the dread of the situation still played in my mind. I quietly made my way towards the trailhead, but my heart stopped when I saw a lonely figure walking toward me in the distance. My heart was shoved to the pit of my stomach, thinking that it was the little girl again, but to my relief, it was a tall, burly hiker making his way up the hill. His hiking poles dug into the soft ground as he worked his way in my direction. It dawned on me that he was making his way toward that demonic little girl. I needed to say something, but as my warning built up in my chest, a familiar sweet voice slithered from the trees. "Shh, leave," it said. My skin broke out in goose flesh. The burly man huffed his way around me, giving me a polite smile as he passed. I stood there, frozen, as he rounded a corner and disappeared from view. I darted my gaze around the woods, realizing that the little girl still watched from the darkness. It is safe to say that the rest of the hike back down the mountain was the fastest I'd ever hiked. When I reached the trailhead, I looked at the sign marking the beginning of the hike. Sweet Connie Trail. This is a memorial trail dedicated to Connie Renner, who lost her life on this same hike on the 15th of April 2016. At the bottom of the sign was a picture of the little girl. It's been a few months since this happened. I haven't been outdoors since, and to tell you the truth, I never want to go outside again. Fuck nature, fuck hiking, and fuck Sweet Connie Trail. If that didn't send chills down your spine, I don't know what will. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoy these late-night horrors, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. I'll see you in the next one, if you're still awake.